James, and I'd like to welcome you to the Oracle Outlook for the week starting April the 30th, 2018. This week, I'm breaking the Lenormand streak that I've been on, and I'm working with a playing card deck, and that's because I just started a video series where I'm sharing about my personal study and practice of cartomancy with playing cards. So there's 3 installments in, so I've been in that space, been doing a lot of work with the playing cards, so I figured I would just go ahead and continue that for the Oracle Outlook this week. So the deck that's going to be assisting me this week is the Cartomancer Poker Deck. You've seen it before, and it is by Alain, Benoit, and I have it right here on hand. So we're going to start shuffling the cards, and I'm focusing on our usual intention and question for when we get together for these readings, and that is, what do we need to know for the week ahead? Feeling one more time will be great. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the cards. And now I'm going to fan them out. And I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Those will be the cards we work with this week. 3, 4, we're down to the last one. And what will be card 5? I'm liking this one. Okay. So now that I have the card selected, I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up and we'll put that to one side. So now I have the 5 cards laid out. And this week I'm feeling like I want to start with the middle card this week. So the middle card for me always represents the central issue or focus. Something that we're being asked to focus our attention on this week. And so here we have the Jack of Hearts. So this card for me can represent, if we're talking about a person, Jacks can represent younger people of either gender. So for some of us, we may be focusing on a younger person. A younger person may need our time and attention. And the Hearts is a suit that represents relationships, feelings, emotions. So this could be somebody that we are emotionally connected to. If not that, then Jacks are also messengers. So this could be news or message from a loved one, or news or message about a relationship, or the news or message may be something of an emotional nature if I take all of my considerations for Hearts into play here. So I'm seeing that as a possibility. So again, something having to do with a younger person, someone that we may be emotionally connected to. Could also be news or messages either of an emotional nature, or again, news or message from a loved one. So those are my typical go-tos for the Jack of Hearts. So now I'm looking at the image, because one of the wonderful things about this particular deck is that every card has an image on it. So it makes it feel like a combination of a playing card deck and an oracle deck. So here we have the Herald of the Heart. So I'm looking at the image, and there is a girl who looks like she's drinking tea, and tied to her arm with ribbon is a fish. So there could be something having to do with something of a spiritual nature. I tend to look at the fish is something along those lines. Fish for me represents spirituality symbolically. So there may be something of a spiritual connection to the message or the news, because sometimes this card is known as the mystical messenger card. So there is that. The other thing that's coming to me in the moment, because I'm seeing a different image in my head to get me to say this message, sometimes this card is known as the Christ card. And with that, it implies a message of needing to make some kind of sacrifice. So for some of us this week, we may be focusing on a particular situation, may have to do with a loved one, in which some sort of sacrifice is going to be made. And so you have to ask yourself the question, am I willing to make that sacrifice? So there is that with the Jack of Hearts. So now let's take a look at the surrounding cards, because they may give us more information about the central issue. Right, so starting with the card on the far left, I'm feeling inclined to read these 2 cards, the cards on the left side of the Jack, as influences that have led up to maybe the central issue or the focus, right? So starting with the card on the far left, okay, here we have the Ace of Clubs. So for me, this card can represent new work or new business, because I read this suit of clubs as work and business first. That's just me. The other thing here could be something of a social nature, because clubs is also the suit that represents being social or social activity. So there may be something new along those lines, right? Could be the start of something, the beginning of something, because aces represent the start of something or the beginning of something. It could also be potential for the future. So now other aspects of this card that come into play for me is that this card can also be about news or messages, and with that there may be something of a legal component to it, because I tend to look at the Ace of Clubs as legal paperwork or legal documentation. So there may be something of a legal nature. And so now we had the Jack of Hearts as the center card, and remember I talked about this idea about news or messages, so that's being repeated to some degree. So it may be that a loved one or somebody that we are emotionally close to some degree may be going through some sort of legal kind of situation, and it may be in its developing stages. Now, I'm stopping to look at the image before I was going to offer some other possibilities for the Ace of Clubs itself. And I'm looking at the image, and there is a person who has their hands up, and so it could be something having to do with activity, and I'm looking at the way the hands are positioned, like you know, this idea like I don't know kind of thing. So there may be something that somebody has gotten themselves entangled, because I'm looking at the rest of the image and now it looks like snake, and so I'm thinking of snake from Lenormand for me, and that can represent some sort of complication or some sort of entanglement, right? So there is that, and so maybe that's the person is entangled in something and they don't know how best to handle the situation, right? And so that may be what the news or message is about. They may be seeking some kind of help. That could also be where the sacrifice comes in, right? That I mentioned before with this card being the Christ card, right? So I'm looking at that. And then the other thing that I wanted to say about the Ace of Clubs before the snake symbolism got my attention is that this card is also known as a contract card. Interestingly enough, that if you are familiar with Lenormand, the ring card, which also can represent a contract, right, has the insert of the Ace of Clubs, right? And so for me in cartomancy, when I'm just dealing with playing cards, the Ace of Clubs has the same connotation. So there may be something having to do with a contract, and that would make sense with the legal paperwork, legal documentation aspect of the card itself. But it could also be about this idea about commitment. If we go with the idea that a contract is a legally binding agreement or commitment, then it could just be a matter of this card is just being about a commitment. So it could just be saying too, like we are maybe in the beginning stages of a commitment, and that may be where this idea about sacrifice comes in, the idea about a relationship with another person, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that with the Ace of Clubs. So now let's take a look at the card in between the two. And here we have, I love this card. So here we have the Four of Clubs. So the first thing that gets my attention is that we have two cards from the same suit as influences that may be leading up to or playing a part in the central issue or focus. So clubs as a suit for me can represent work and business, like I talked about, this idea about being social or social activity, but also about making progress, right? It could imply, if it's not about work or business in a literal sense, then this is about putting work or effort into a situation, right? So there may be some work that we have to do in order to see a situation progress or move forward, right? So there is that. Now, I'm looking at the image, and so the image has a wheel on it, and it looks like a roulette wheel. So there could be an opportunity. Remember now, if we go with the idea that the ace is talking about something new, something beginning, or potential for the future, then there may be some opportunity here, and it may come as a risk or a gamble. There may be that, because I'm looking at the idea about the roulette wheel, and so for me that symbolizes this idea of a gamble. And you know, you may have to look at what are the odds? Are the odds in your favor, playing with the gambling analogy? Are the odds in your favor, or are the odds against you? And so you have to take the step to do what I call weighing the pros and cons and looking at it from all possible sides and angles. So that is one possibility here with the Four of Clubs. Now, I talked about this idea with the Jack of Hearts, or the Herald of the Heart, as a news or message kind of card, playing the role of the messenger. If that is the case, then the Four of Clubs is a card that can represent a phone call. So it could just be a matter that the news or message is received through a phone call. So there is that as a possibility. The other thing here with this card for me can represent a car. If we go with the idea about the wheel, and it can represent 4 wheels. So it could be, there may be an issue having to do with a car in particular. So the legal situation or the legal paperwork or documentation may be around the vehicle, an actual car, you know. If it's not that, then it could just be a matter of something having to do with travel or transportation. So that is how I would see the 4 of clubs. Again, this card is about, you know, something moving forward. If we go with the vehicle analogy, about making progress, moving something forward. It may be as a result of taking a look at the opportunity being presented, seeing if it's a gamble or a risk, or what are the risks involved. So this way you are fully informed before you move forward in that venture. So there is that to consider. Now taking a look at the other side, here we have the 6 of spades. So for me, spades is a suit that can represent problems, challenges, blocks, obstacles, and hurdles, right? So now here we have maybe a slight bump in the road, because the 6 of spades can represent taking responsibility for a challenge, a problem, a hurdle, some sort of difficulty, you know, taking responsibility for that, because the 6 is a number of responsibility for me. So there is that. This card, when it comes up, can suggest that it's time to end the situation once and for all. So it could be saying too, like, what if there is a problem on the horizon, you're being asked to take responsibility for it, but also to do what it is that you may need to do to end it once and for all. Now, interestingly enough, if that message doesn't resonate, then the 4 of clubs, again, with this idea about moving something forward and, you know, a progression, that kind of thing, the 6 of spades is also a card about making progress. So we have the situation or that particular message being repeated twice with the cards each on each side of the Jack of Hearts. So there is something about progressing something, moving something forward, but also this idea about maybe something needing to be completed once and for all. The other thing here with this card for me is that the 6 is also a number of communication. So if we go with the idea that spades can represent a problem or a challenge or a difficulty, then there may need to be a conversation about a problem, conversation about a difficulty. It could also be the conversation may involve this idea about how are we going to end this? How are we going to resolve this? So this way we can move on, because this card is about ending something so we can move on. So there is that to consider with the 6 of spades. And now taking a look at the final card, here we have the King of Diamonds. So the King of Diamonds can represent a person. When I'm seeing it as the last card, it can represent an actual person who will be playing a role or a part in how the situation is resolved. And interestingly enough, in the line, he is facing the 6 of spades, right? So he may have some way of resolving the situation, right? It could be saying too, like the resolution of the situation is in this person's hands. So let's talk about that. For me, the king can represent a business person. So interestingly enough, we had on the other side of the line, we had the Ace of Clubs. And remember I said the Ace of Clubs could represent new work or new business. So he can represent either starting a business or running a business. So there is maybe this, again, this work or business component to the situation for some people, right? There is that. He also can represent, you know, finances. So it could just be a matter of somebody managing their money better. I tend to look at the kings as people who are in a position of leadership, people who are in a position of authority. Symbolically, they can represent a theme of mastery and control, right? So there is that. So it could be saying too, like somebody is achieving a greater sense of control over their finances, right? And so maybe that is part of the problem that needs to be resolved, because a spade and a diamond together can represent, you know, working through some sort of financial problem or financial difficulty, right? And coming out on the other side of that. So there is that. So he can represent, a person connected to money. He can represent, if he's not a business person, he can also represent somebody who has money or some sort of financial means, right? So there is that. So it could just be a matter of if the business situation involves a contract of a legal nature, then this person could be the one who has the money, right? So, and what is he going to get as a return on the investment of his money into that business venture? So there is that to consider. Now, the King of Diamonds can also represent, I'm looking at the title of the card, and it's Chief of the Earth. So this could be somebody who is in a situation where they are managing material resources, not just money, but material resources. This is a person who's known as a natural leader. So that's where I get the idea of material resources. So somebody who may be in environment, I tend to see this person as a naturalist or an environmentalist. So it could be on some level the work or the business may be more of an environmental type thing or an environmental type nature. So there is that. I'm seeing that. Another possibility here could be a matter of somebody doing something in one's own natural environment, right? And taking care of business in that regard. Like, what do you need to do in your own natural environment, especially with the Six of Spades talking about resolving a situation, especially if it's a problematic experience or a difficult experience. What do you need to do to resolve that in your own natural environment? And as I'm saying that, it could just be a matter of doing what it is that you need to do to regain some kind of control over your natural environment, your natural space. I'm seeing that as a possibility. So I'm looking at the image and asking myself, what else do I want to say about this card? So I'm feeling, again, possibilities here could be a person who is involved in the situation and who has within his or her own hands the ability to resolve the situation, right? So there is that. If it's not that, then it could just be a matter of somebody working on their material resources and getting a better handle on it, better management of that, getting a greater sense of control over that. So there is that to consider as well. But also to this idea of, what do you need to do to get a better handle or a better grip on what happens in your own environment. The only other thing I want to say about this card, and I'll close on this note, sometimes this card, if we're talking about leadership and assuming a leadership position, and I'm going more with the idea about taking control or getting your power back, or this idea of a greater sense of authority, like you establishing yourself as your own best authority, then this card would be about leading by example or setting the example. So if we go with the idea possibly that the Jack of Hearts represents a younger person, and you're trying to assist this younger person with whatever situation they may have found themselves entangled in, then it would be a matter of you leading or setting an example. Leading by example or setting example. It's making me feel it's more important about what you do more so than what you are saying, right? And so that may be where the problem with the communication is coming in, because the words aren't working, right? It may be more a matter of the actions. Clubs represent action, so it's more about the actions rather than the words. So on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. And as I wrap up, I'd like to take a moment to thank those of you who sent comments in regarding last week's reading. There were 3 comments especially that I wanted to mention. I responded to these people when their comments came in, but I want to give them a special shout out. So for Cheryl, Derek, and a viewer who goes by the handle DMA55, I want to personally thank you for the lovely comments that you sent me. I want to thank you for your support and encouraging words about what it is that I'm trying to do here on the channel. And I want to especially thank Derek, who sends me updates each and every week. I always look forward to Derek's updates. So I wanted to say thank you so much. When your comments came in, they just really touched me. There are no mistakes about when a comment comes in. And each of your comments made my day. So I just want to say thank you again for that. And as I acknowledge Cheryl, Derek, and DMA55, I also want to acknowledge those of you who continually tune in every week, who continually send me comments every week. Your support means the world to me. And as I always say, I can't do what I do here without any of you out there. So thank you. You all continue to inspire me and motivate me to continue producing content for the channel. So once again, thank you one and all. And on that note, I'm James Himm Mitchell. I'm closing. And as I always say every week, I am so thankful that you are sharing space here with me for these weekly readings. And I look forward to seeing you in our next weekly reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day. And I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.